When discussing the worst franchises in the NBA, you won't have to list very many teams before you get to the Minnesota Timberwolves. In totality, the Timberwolves have made the playoffs once since trading Kevin Love to Cleveland, and in 2021 it appears that they are back at square one. At the making of this video, the Wolves have the worst record in the NBA, meaning that they'll be in contention for the first selection once again in the 2021 NBA Draft. While the number 1 overall pick might seem like a great thing for a struggling franchise, you have to wonder if an organization as bad as Minnesota will be able to take full advantage of another high draft pick. Currently on their roster, the Wolves have the top 2 picks from the 2015 draft in Towns and D'Angelo Russell, the 6th pick in the 2019 draft in Jarrett Culver, and the first overall selection in 2020, Anthony Edwards. I know that this team has been dealing with injury and health issues this year, but I doubt that they'd be competing for the playoffs had they been healthy all season. When I watch the Timberwolves play, I see a team that has a number of great individual talents, but a team that also lacks cohesiveness and chemistry, and that's a really big issue. With that being said, you can understand why I'm not too hopeful that another top pick will be the immediate answer in Minnesota. There are fundamental problems with this franchise, and they need to fix them quickly if they want Karl Anthony Towns to stay. In this video, I'm going to be talking about the 3 main things that Minnesota must do in order to get this team heading in the right direction. Number 1, fire Ryan Saunders. At the start of the 2019-20 season, Ryan Saunders gave Timberwolves fans some hope by implementing a more modern style of basketball. With Tom Thibodeau as head coach, the Wolves typically finished towards the bottom of the league in pace and 3-point attempts. But when Saunders took over the head coaching job, he had Minnesota playing extremely fast while also shooting a lot of threes. However, outside of a 10-8 start to the 2019-20 season, the Timberwolves haven't had much success with Saunders as their head coach. In my opinion, most of his problems have come as a result of his inexperience. Saunders is the youngest coach in the NBA at just 34 years of age, and you can tell by the way he manages games. First of all, I'd like to know if the Timberwolves are on pace to break the record for the most amount of different starting lineups used in a season, because it feels like there is no continuity with the team's starting 5. It seems like one game a guy could be in the starting lineup, and the next he could be getting a DNP coach's decision. The strategy really confuses me here because I don't know how it benefits the team. Whether you're trying to be competitive this year or build for the future, you aren't allowing for the players on this team to develop chemistry or confidence when their roles are changing nearly every single night. On top of that, the minutes distribution seems to be almost too spread out, and it makes me wonder if Saunders is simply trying to be the nice coach that gives everyone minutes. The issue with this strategy is that players begin to feel like they won't be rewarded for playing well. One thing that I've seen many Wolves fans complain about is Saunders' tendency to sub players out even when they are hot. This is problematic because it kills any momentum that Minnesota may have, and it also gets whatever player that was hot out of rhythm. Finally, Saunders has not been great at adjusting his game plan to best suit his players' abilities. The offense should look different when Ricky Rubio is in the game, as opposed to when D'Angelo Russell is in the game, and the lineups should adjust depending on who's running the point. If Rubio is in the game, he should be playing with 4 other shooters alongside him, rather than non-threats from the outside such as Josh Okogie and Jared Vanderbilt. I could go on a little longer about how bad of a coach Ryan Saunders has been, but I think you get the point by now. If I were Minnesota, I would look to get rid of Saunders and hire someone like Mike D'Antoni. D'Antoni may not be capable of leading the Wolves to a championship, but he would make the most out of this team's offensive potential, which could turn them into a playoff team out west. Obviously, Mike D'Antoni is not the only answer. My point is that Minnesota should be looking for a coach that can make the most out of the team on the offensive end. Now, Ryan Saunders is the son of Flip Saunders, who was a great Minnesota Timberwolves coach, so that could factor into the organization, maybe giving him a longer leash than they would any other coach. But there's no denying that there are things that Ryan Saunders will have to improve on if he wants Minnesota to keep him there long term. Number 2, prioritize fit. Considering that Minnesota has tried to put more of an emphasis on 3-point shooting the past 2 seasons, it didn't seem to make much sense for them to trade for Ricky Rubio. In addition to Rubio, Josh Okogie has averaged 25 and 21 minutes per game the past 2 seasons, despite the fact that he's a career 26% 3-point shooter. Factor in the draft selection of another notoriously poor shooter in Jarrett Culver in 2019, and you start to question what exactly Minnesota is trying to do with its roster. I don't want to make it seem like the Timberwolves don't have any shooters on this team, because in all honesty, they have quite a few great shooters and scorers. However, if you have a few players in your rotation that are non-threats from the outside, it can really shrink the floor for your best offensive talents. That being said, Minnesota needs to make an effort to bring in more two-way players that are capable of spacing the floor. There is enough offensive talent on this team with guys like Russell, Beasley, Edwards, Towns, and a few others. They just need to surround these guys with good complementary players. If Minnesota ends up with the first pick in 2021, Cade Cunningham would be a great pick as he is an unselfish, all-around player, but they could also trade down to get the third pick, acquire a few additional assets by doing so, and select either Jonathan Kuminga or Evan Mobley. I'm really intrigued by the idea of adding Mobley to this team as I think he could be a great fit next to Karl Anthony Towns. Mobley has immense defensive potential, and if he could develop a respectable three-point shot, he could have the same impact on Minnesota that Jaren Jackson Jr. has had on the Memphis Grizzlies. In the meantime, playing next to one of the greatest three-point shooting bigs of all time in Karl Anthony Towns would allow for Mobley to start at the 4 from day one without disrupting the spacing too much. A young core of Russell, Beasley, Edwards, Mobley, Towns, Reed, McDaniels, Noel, Vanderbilt, and Hernan Gomez would be really promising for the future. They'll likely have to wait until the summer of 2022 for Okogie, Layman, and Rubio's contracts to expire, but once they're combined $26 million in salaries off the books, Minnesota could use that money to sign veterans as well as some 3-and-D players. The last thing that Minnesota will have to figure out is what they want to do with Malik Beasley going forward. Beasley has had a breakout season this year, averaging 21 points on nearly 40% from 3, but I'm not a huge fan of how he fits next to Anthony Edwards in the starting lineup. While those guys are both extremely talented offensively, they're both listed at 6'4", which is a problem when Minnesota is going up against taller wing scorers. To me, Beasley should be the one that's removed from the starting lineup due to the fact that Anthony Edwards has more potential. I would love to see Beasley as a sixth man, but if he's not willing to accept that role, I'm sure the Timberwolves could get a pretty decent haul for a 20-point-per-game scorer. Number 3, do not trade Karl Anthony Towns. Now I know what you might be thinking, Towns is the Wolves' best asset, and if they were to trade him before he possibly demanded a trade, they could get a lot more in return for him that way. However, a decision like this could really backfire on the Timberwolves organization, and it could have long-lasting effects that persist for years down the line. The reason why I say this is because Karl Anthony Towns has been through so much in the past year. Towns lost his mother in April of 2020, and he said that he hasn't been the same since her tragic passing. To make matters worse, this past December, Towns said that he has lost 7 family members to COVID-19. Even after going through this, Towns has shown up and given it his all this year despite having injury and health concerns of his own this season. He's endured so much pain, yet he still gives 100% even though the organization has failed to put a competent team around him year after year. In my opinion, trading Towns would be equally as bad as the Isaiah Thomas Celtics-Cavs trade. Before the start of the 2017 playoffs, Isaiah received terrible news that his sister had passed away. On top of that, Isaiah Thomas was dealing with injury issues, but he still went out and had some incredible playoff performances, ultimately getting the Celtics to the Eastern Conference Finals that year. So when Boston decided to trade him after that playoff run, it left a stain on the Celtics organization. Look no further than what Anthony Davis's father had to say about the trade. He said, "I would never want my son to play for Boston after what they'd done to Isaiah Thomas. No loyalty. God gives his heart and soul, and they traded him." At the end of the day, NBA players are people as well, and people want to be treated like they are actual people, not expendable objects. Minnesota is already at a disadvantage based on the fact that they are not a free agent destination, nor does their franchise have a storied history full of winning. If Towns requests a trade, that's one thing, but if Minnesota goes behind his back and trades him after everything that he's been through, they would solidify themselves as the worst organization in the NBA, and I guarantee that no young player would be thrilled at the prospect of being drafted there in the future. I do think that this Timberwolves team has a lot of potential, and I do believe that they would be more competitive this year if they didn't have as many injuries. However, I still can't see them becoming a playoff team in the West unless they do the things that I mentioned in this video. Let me know down in the comments what you think Minnesota should do going forward, and with all that being said, I'm out.